Catherine Liddle is CEO of SNAICC, the national peak body representing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, and she joins me now from Alice Springs. Catherine Liddle, thank you very much for your time. Last night we saw debate host David Speers challenge both leaders on the federal government's successive failure to close the gap in outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. What did you make of their responses?
Look, I think it was great to see the acknowledgement that they haven't stepped up to the mark in the way they should have. And I think most people would have also heard at that point in time a significant gap in them creating the pathway that would then enable us to actually build the programs, build the policies that would close the gap. Now, we know that both sides of politics 4 years ago signed up to the National Agreement on Closing the Gap. And that was the piece where they said, we've stuffed this. We acknowledge we've stuffed this, and we're going to get better outcomes if we truly work alongside Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Now, that piece about not visiting communities, that is fundamental to being able to create appropriate policies. You cannot, in a leadership position, come up with promises or commitments or policies or programs if you haven't gone and consulted with the community who is suffering at the first place, who will be the beneficiaries of a program, who will be the people who in the end determine whether or not that policy has worked. And again, when you look at things like what I lean into, and that is children, out-of-home care rates are a national disgrace. The number of our children in juvenile justice settings is a national disgrace. Those things that relate to harmful self-mutilation, and I have to call it what it is, suicide, are increasing. Come on, step up, lead, go and talk to the people you need to be speaking to.
Yes. As a CEO of SNAICC, you advocate for Indigenous children, and we saw David Speers raise this issue about the numbers in out-of-home care. You've said it's a national disgrace. Give us an idea of just how far there is to go to close the gap.
How far there is to go when it speaks to children. Look, if we just go to the out-of-home care statistics, nearly half of all children in out-of-home care are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. Now, I know we heard the leaders talk a little bit of money and where money should go. So let's chat about where that money goes. Currently in Australia, despite how horrific those statistics are, the bulk of the investment into protecting children currently goes into removing children from their families. Now, that money, and again, this is where the detail matters, the bulk of that money actually goes to non-Indigenous organisations. So those statistics don't even relate to community control. Of that 16%, I think it's about 6 million goes into child protection, 16% actually goes into prevention and intervention and support, those things that would actually stop this from happening. And again, if you analyse those statistics even further, only a tiny fraction of that 16% actually goes into the Indigenous community controlled sector. Now, this is why those conversations with community are really, really important, because when you drill down into those statistics, you will see that those services, Aboriginal community controlled services that are responding to the needs and nuances of their own communities, are actually starting to get some incredible wins on the board. But when I say crisis, we say crisis because there is like a tidal wave, and governments are this incredible apparatus, right? Each political component is another piece of that machinery. The reason we have things like the National Agreement is it identifies what you call levers in that apparatus that could be pulled simultaneously to ensure that instead of a tidal wave hitting our children and our families, we are creating the pathways and channels that would divert that tide and ensure that children and families were getting the supports that they need on the ground. Now, that comes only with consulting with families and consulting with the communities.
How is it, Catherine Liddle, that 18 months on from the failed voice referendum, we've just seen a lack of political will for new policy and actual reform on a bipartisan basis?
Look, I think the general feeling across the board for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is Indigenous affairs was dropped like a hot potato, and that there was this feeling that anyone who touched it might be tainted with that poison chalice. And it's not true. If you're a leader, your job is to step up. Your job is to not play games with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. These are the lives of our children. These are the lives of our families. This is investments into community. So I think what we have is a chance to now reset. And that is, come on, guys, you've got 3 weeks left. Step up to the plate on this. Tell us what your policies are. Tell us how those policies are going to invest in our communities. Tell us how you're going to be working alongside of us to get better results. And again, if we lean into where the evidence is, the evidence that the Productivity Commission brought forward, and it's their job to analyse whether or not the government is spending well. And what it said was, we are getting incredible gains when the government commits to the priority reforms on closing the gap, where it truly budges, when it truly invests in change. And we have seen that. The problem is when we're looking at the really pointy things like child protection, like juvenile justice, they are the pieces that are hot potatoes. They are the political footballs. So instead of picking our children up and nurturing them, we're moulding them into this football, and we're kicking them from one goalpost to the next goalpost. And the person that wins is the person that gets the most cheers in those stands. The person that loses out is the child at the centre of that.
If you or anyone you know was affected by this video, please contact Beyond Blue on 1300 224 636 or Lifeline on 13 11 14.